Yesterday I shared on WhatsApp with a number of you a beautiful song by Swami Kriyananda, Peace. And it made me realize that there's one particular phrase in that song. It goes, cool clouds that gather to bless us, mist hands that soothe away pain, in the sense that the morning mist is caressing us like hands, soothing us. And I've known this song very well for the last 50 years, and I discovered the other day that in all of that time, I thought that the word mist was M-I-S-S-E-D. In the sense, I sort of imagined, well, like a child who's missing his mother, and then she's there, and her mist hands, stroke his head and comfort him. And I thought, well, now, most of my life, my job has been working with words. I had heard that song hundreds of times, seen it written many times. And I was, shall we say, surprised that I could make such a basic mistake. And made me think how many more simple mistakes that I've made, of factual errors. And for all of us, how many basic truths might we have misunderstood? And that brings us to our topic, the seed thought that truth invites, it never commands. The voice of truth, our higher self, invites us. And there's a lot of loud commanding and demanding around us all the time. And we can, I think, be reasonably sure that all of this noise is not the inner truth inviting us. It's something else. In the Gita, Sri Krishna tells us, attraction and repulsion of sense objects belong to the natural ebb and flow of duality. Beware equally of them both, for they are man's greatest enemies. Krishna here is speaking not of our run-of-the-mill likes and dislikes, but the extreme versions of hatred and infatuation. Swamiji says, all of human suffering is due to the simple thought that things ought to be other than they are, as Swamiji referred to also in this affirmation. And not getting what we think we want, that frustrated desire can lead to that loud demanding and commanding, can lead to anger, to hatred, to violence, to war. And when we watch the news or turn on the television or video games or movies, what do we see very often? That same anger, violence, and war. And we can't avoid it, but we can reduce our exposure, and if we're strong, we cannot be affected by it so much. And there's also more gentle demands closer to home. The boss who wants more of our time, the child who wants something just because he wants something, and people who are very happy to tell us what we ought to do with our lives. and even the loud voices within our head that are telling us that we need to be different than we are. But truth invites, it never commands like this. In his book, Rays of the One Light, Swamiji tells us, free will is a basic principle of life. God never coerces. He invites us to live in such a way that we find fulfillment in ourselves. If we refuse to live rightly, God simply says, I will wait. We have eternity to live. In that eternity, we live as we choose. In self-created darkness, a darkness as intense and as long-lasting as we choose, or in the infinite light, the true self, which is God. We have free will, and the choice is ours between those two realities. Yogananda ji was an avatar. He certainly had the power to command people, but he basically never used it. There was one funny exception where he was giving a public lecture, and near the beginning of the talk, two ladies in the back stood up and they were starting to leave. And he said, sit down. You will never hear a talk like this in your life. But that was an exception. And I never recall Swami Kriyananda ever demanding, but he constantly would invite us. His first words to me were an invitation. When I went to a discourse of his in San Francisco, I went up to him afterwards and told him how I had read his books on yoga and spiritual communities. And he said, oh, you must come and visit us at Ananda Village. And those words I had a mental reaction afterwards. And it was like, well, I don't want to just come and visit. I think maybe I want to live there. It's like I think I needed to come to that decision and confirmation on my own. And his words brought me to that greater sense of confidence and of courage. And I needed to ask myself, is this what you want? And with Swamiji, we asked him to discipline us, to correct us. We gave him permission to command us. But he respected our free will and to choose a direction that we wanted to go in and to choose how far in that direction we wanted to go. But every time that we would have a group meeting, he would suggest ideas for helping others, reaching out, and he would invite us to join if we felt to. And he would test the waters to see our interest. And he would say, well, perhaps we could start a center in Los Angeles, Sacramento. We could go to Italy. We could go to India. We could start a restaurant. And he was seeing what response we had to that. God is inviting us all the time, 24/7. And if we don't hear him, hear that call, then we haven't tuned our radio to that particular wavelength. Swamiji when he was a young man, before he came on the path, he felt the invitation that maybe Indian philosophy had an answer to the truth that he was seeking. And he felt drawn to the Autobiography of a Yogi. But there was some mental static on his radio, and this is very, very interesting part of his story. And his intellect told him, you know, you need to save money. You buy too many books anyways, and you know, this book isn't for you. And then he heard another voice in his head, and he said, how do you know this isn't the right book? Until you read it. And he listened to that invitation. It was like it was Yoganandaji himself inviting him. And to hear that calm, quiet inner voice, that invitation, we need to still the mind and to quiet the effect of all of the loud commands around us. And to clear our consciousness of negativity, to clear the deck so that we can receive. Swamiji tells the story of once when he was with Yoganandaji, and he was invited to give a presentation to another organization. And he did that, and then afterwards that organization had an installation of officers, a formal function. And during that, all this chaos broke out, and there was infighting and people were arguing. And afterwards, Yoganandaji said, how did it go? It was a disaster, wasn't it? And he said, but don't talk about it. He didn't want us to talk about negativity, about negative things, to accept that yes, negativity exists, but don't dwell on it. Don't give it energy. Be even-minded and cheerful, not excited by good or bad. We don't have to be affected by negativity. There's this story that Swami Vivekananda would tell of the saint who returned to his ashram and his body was all bloody and injured. And the shocked disciples asked him what happened. And he said, oh, we were having such a good time. I was in the village and the boys there, they were throwing stones. And it didn't affect him, the fact that they were throwing stones at him. He was so non-attached from the ego that this to him was simply an event. It didn't happen to me, it simply happened. And this is more and more the attitude that we want to have, that we're not affected by what happens around us. If we're happy in ourselves, then we will be happy under all circumstances. Thank you.
In the 3rd chapter of the Gita, Krishna says, even the wise behave in accordance with nature as it is manifested in them. Of what avail then is suppression? So what nature is Krishna talking about here? We have a universal nature. From joy I came, for joy I live, in sacred joy I melt again. This is our true nature. We come from God, and we are in the process of slowly returning to Him. We are always a part of God. And we can experience that in meditation, when we're feeling that divine light, His infinite peace, the power of Om, when we're communing with His divine qualities. And that's when we, I think, most feel one with that universal consciousness. And also, during our meditations here from the ashram, it's amazing how when we meditate together, you at home and us here in the temple, It's amazing how we are connected by the vibration of our gurus, of God's light, of His love. And, until we had the situation of lockdown, we never really would have known that we could have also felt so together as a spiritual family, so as one, and yet not be in the same room. And so it's been a wonderful experiment in that sense. And perhaps also we experience some of that universal consciousness even with our own family members. Maybe as parents, we always feel connected to our children. Or as children, we always feel connected to our parents or to our siblings. And another way we may experience that universal consciousness, I'm sure you've had the experience of you are thinking of somebody and suddenly they call on the phone. Or you have the same exact thought as somebody else, miles and miles away. I remember the night that I thought, we have to have a pilgrimage to Israel. I woke up the next morning and Asha had written me a WhatsApp saying, we have to have a pilgrimage to Israel. And it just really shows how much on the same wavelength, especially devotees together, enjoy and experience this universal consciousness. And yet, of course, we also have our own unique awareness and unique nature that is not always so universal, but each of us, as Swami has said, has a part to play in the grand symphony of life. Each of us are playing a different instrument, a different note, but together they all blend to make a beautiful, beautiful music of the spheres. And when you think of no snowflake is alike, each of our eyes, if you gaze into the windows of the soul, the eyes, no two sets of eyes are the same. Even our voices are different. I love listening to Master's voice. I love listening to Swamiji's voice. I love it when we all sing together. We each are unique, and yet we have the divine flowing through us and helps us to appreciate each of our own unique natures. And at the same time, when we incarnate into this world, we carry with us our own unique energy pattern, our own unique aura, the pattern in our chakras. And within that pattern, we also are very unique. And the positive qualities that flow through us are different than, mine might be different than yours, and the negative or not so beneficial qualities that flow through me also may not be the same that flow through you. We're all working with different kind of qualities. And I'm reminded of a story that I heard. There's just beautiful sculptures of angels in Europe. And one sculptor who was asked, wow, how did you make such a beautiful sculpture? And he just said, well, there was an angel inside this block of marble that was trying to become free, and I just freed her. And, when you think of the sculptor just chipping and chipping and chipping away at this block of marble until he created the most beautiful angel of light. And we think sort of our energy patterns, our chakras are a bit like that. We need to chip away at anything that's imprisoning us, that's holding us back, that's holding us down, that's blocking us. Like that block of marble might be heavy on us, but we're trying as angels of light to be free from that. And we are all angels of light. And, we know that there are these forces of nature, these flows of energy, some that are moving ever away from God, from our home in God, and a flow of energy that's always moving back towards spirit. I think I talked about this last week. And many of us just are born in whatever situation our karma has brought us, and inadvertently we landed in that stream that's going outward and outward away from God. And we went to school and we tried to obey our parents and we did everything we thought we should do, but somehow or another, perhaps we stayed in that stream for a long time, moving out, and maybe some of the harmful qualities within us got reinforced and we created even more karma in our energy pattern. And yet somewhere along the line, we became more wise, and we perhaps picked up the Autobiography of a Yogi, or we went to a spiritual class, and we did something and we started to wake up. And then with a decision, we stepped back into the stream that was slowly moving back towards God. And Keshava just told that story of Swami Kriyananda, how he would always work with positive energy. Within the communities, there would always be some naysayers, some people that did not want to go along, did not want to play harmoniously with others in the community. Swami never gave them any particular negative energy, or scolded them, or forced them, or coerced them in any way. He worked with people with positive energy, with positive magnetism, and created a stronger and stronger vortex of positive energy. And perhaps those people were swept up in that positive vortex of energy, or perhaps they spun away from Ananda, or spun away from the spiritual path, who knows. But we need to work with our natures the way it is. It's just what Krishna says here: accept our nature. What is the use of suppression? So we have to work with what is, who we are. And that is part of the spiritual path, introspection. What do I need to work on? Keshava's affirmation: let's accept our nature and work with it and improve it. Let's keep chipping away at that block of marble so that angel of light can be released. And that's our work on the spiritual path. When we go to Raja Yoga classes, if you've gone to some of our level 2 classes, Art and Science of Raja Yoga, we focus at some point on the yamas and the niyamas. And one of the yamas is satya, truthfulness. And one of the more subtle aspects of not telling a lie in truthfulness is not wishing things were different than they are. And that's part of accepting our true nature. Just accept this is the karmic pattern we have brought with us, and we can work with it the way it is. If we suppress it, or we ignore it, or pretend it's not there, how can we improve it and become that perfect angel of light? And there is another yama, asteya, which is non-greed, I think it is. And it's like, we don't want to wish we had somebody else's karma, or we don't want to wish that we have the benefits or the good things that they are going through. Perhaps somebody has gotten a promotion at work and you did not, or someone's child got admitted into a really good school and yours did not. It is not us to envy them or to feel that separation from them. We want to celebrate their successes. One of the poems in Whispers from Eternity by Yogananda is like, let us spend for others like we would spend for ourselves. And let us celebrate the successes of others like we would celebrate for ourselves. And let us alleviate the suffering of others as we would try hard to alleviate the suffering of ourselves. And we think, yeah, that sounds so nice, but master was a master. I don't know. That is our reality. We are moving towards that. These are our own realities. This is our universal nature. We are one with those realities. Think of, many of you perhaps have been here at a spiritual fair. And we all have different roles to play. Some of us are in the registration, or greeting people, or serving the prasad, or teaching the classes, or chanting outside, or sitting at the book table. And so we each have our own role to play at those spiritual fairs. But each of us are there thinking of others, giving our energy, our time, our resources to others so that they also may be awakened on the spiritual path. And so on one hand, individually, we feel so uplifted and joy-filled that we put out that energy. And yet, how do we feel as a group after the fair? We did it together. As a Sangha, we put out all this energy and light, and now there is more light in this world, and people's lives are changed. In this way, especially on the spiritual path, in our spiritual family, we work together like this. And we need to make sure that we are getting back into that flow, into that practice of the realities that we're talking about, the realities that we are one, that we enjoy this universal oneness, and that I want to give my energy to others. Every time we do seva, every time we think God is flowing through us, every time we give some of our Guru Dakshina, our resources, our time, our energy to Ananda, to others, we are practicing that reality, that universal nature that we are. We're practicing becoming angels of light. So this is how we are practicing that greater reality. And that's our dharma, that's what they've told us to do. And so within that, our individual karma, our energy patterns, no matter where they landed us at our birth, it is helping us step back in that stream and bring us back to that infinite sea. From joy I came, for joy I live. In sacred joy I melt again. That is our destiny. And in the meantime, we'll let God and let the Guru be our divine sculptor. And I'm just going to read this poem by Yogananda ji. O divine sculptor, chisel thou my life. Every sound that I make, let it have the vibration of thy voice. Every thought that I think, let it be saturated with the consciousness of thy presence. Let every feeling that I have glow with thy love. Let every act of my will be impregnated with thy divine vitality. Let every thought, every expression, every ambition be ornamented by thee. O divine sculptor, chisel thou my life according to thy design. Joy to you.